Hello and welcome back to On the Soul's Terms podcast. I'm Chris Skidmore. Thanks a lot for joining us today. And today I'm joined by a new friend of mine. Her name is Amanda Simon. Amanda and I met at the Living Astrology's conference in Santa Fe, New Mexico, just a few months ago. And we've become fast friends. She is a fellow student and mentee of Brian Clark. And we have both been working with Brian for around about the same amount of time, around about the last 5 years. So it was a real joy to meet her, and I'm excited to bring this conversation with her today. But to introduce you to her, I'd like to start by reading from her bio here. And it's a little long, but it really feels like it's worth reading out because it will give you a sense of who Amanda is and a bit of a context for the kind of conversation we're having today, which is very much in the poetic, in the mystery, and in the expanding upon and allowing of symbols to speak through us. So Amanda grew up on a farm to a Jewish father and a Fijian mother. Her lineage of water people have always been strongly alive in her. Childhood was living with doors open to animals, smells, elementals, dirt, laboring, making, fixing, machines, weathers of all kinds and more. This living flux of sentience instilled in her marrow that bodily being was vast, coursing with powers we pretend to understand, wrapped and woven in skin to facilitate a human journey. Being astrologically tuned to our living sky is to recognize the continuous conversation between humanity and the sacred, an ongoing reciprocal unfurling with mystery. She tracks, listens with, and cultivates participation through lived life, art, practice, and play, of which astrological listening is paramount. Amanda is a consulting astrologer, acutonics practitioner, and artist, currently studying an MA in art and ecology at Goldsmiths University, where she creates sculptural fields for encounters that seek to constellate our sensorium to become ever more receptive to subtlety, to the myriad of relations we are ongoingly made with and by. She's contributed a chapter to a forthcoming book dedicated to the centaurs of the sky. She also has a passion for teaching and has a busy one-to-one reading practice, as well as hosting a weekly Friday forecast live on Instagram. Amanda has worked alongside She's Lost Control, which is a London-based online portal pioneering expansive practices within lived life. She's been doing that for 6 years and has helped develop their foundations course. And as their in-house astrologer, she supports clients to connect with their multidimensional depth to meet life circumstances with resilience and grace. Amanda has also collaborated with landscape gardeners, weaving the celestial into the terrestrial in physical ways. She's been a guest speaker for Angarad Win, Feather, Fire, Stone and Bone, and has completed a 3-year apprenticeship in contemporary animism with Animate Earth, which helped grow confidence in the felt and living practice of tracking and tending the web of animacy pulsing through worlds within and without. She's also journeyed with Josh Shree of the Emerald and is an alumni of his year-long Mythic Body course. She's trained in dream tending with Topolkar and Pacifica University and continues to develop her relational, soul-centered astrological practice with Brian Clark and Jason Holly. Amanda is also an alumni of Kincentric Leadership's program, The Way of Kinship, and collaborates with co-founder Justine Huxley to grow animate astrological awareness beyond the astrological community. As I mentioned, in October 2025, she offered an experiential workshop as part of the first Living Astrology's conference, hosted and visioned by Jason Holly. And she's in the final month of his unique experiential 18-month practitioner program. Amanda assisted Jason on a recent retreat in the Provence, where they co-crafted a week-long astrological experience in conversation with the living land and sky, working deeply with dream, both sleeping and waking. As of 2026, Amanda will be teaching with the Hermes Hestia Center, dedicated to developing experiential astrology's emergence into the wider astrological community. I'll leave some more links to what Amanda's up to and how to find out more about all of these incredible things that she does in the show notes for you. So yes, that's Amanda. I think it's important to soak into those words to get a sense of who she is and what we'll be talking about today, as the two of us are going to enter the ninth house, the house up the top of the chart, the house of illumination, the the reach towards and the participation in the mind of the gods. So here is my conversation with Amanda Simon. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. It's great to be here. Feels like we've been here for a long time. Since the conference, I feel like we've been in a kind of ongoing conversation with...
Yeah, we kind of got straight to it at the conference, didn't we? We sort of picked it up right in the middle rather than at the beginning, I feel, in our conversations, and jumped straight in there. And so many of our conversations would go this way and that, weaving. I found you a really good buddy to riff with on these topics, and I found our conversations to be... there was striking chords in my imagination again and again, and I felt all sorts of reverberance through my own consciousness that was like, oh yeah, like bringing forth things that I maybe know but hadn't heard put that way, because you have a way with putting things that evoke the imagination. And yeah, so it's a real joy, and Amanda reached out to me to talk about, like, perhaps we could talk ninth house together. And I immediately, when I got your message, I was like, yes, that's what we should do indeed. I would love to have you on the show to talk ninth. And that's what we're going to be doing. Talking about the ninth house today, talking about and through and in and around. And so that's where we're heading. But first of all, I wonder if you'd like to introduce yourself to the audience and let us know who you are.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, thank you. And I would like to say that it's very much a mutual experience of like this, quite not explosive in a dramatic way, but things fire off when we converse, and new connections are made and images embellish, and it's rare actually within an astrological space for me to feel that. Like there's no end to where an image could keep growing and going.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be formalizing it a bit.
Yeah, indeed. It's a real pleasure.
And so I'm based in London, in UK, and I have a dual practice of making art and astrology. And I always hold them together because they are parallel poetic practices. And I'm a sculptor, so I work with space and time and the materiality of things. But I make fields. I make sort of spatial, temporal, material fields that are about encounters. And through an encounter, all sorts of things become opened, invited through the kind of various components of a making. So I think of the work as a constellatory experience and a constellating experience. So both in its spatial arrangement or configuration, but very much about it. It's a configuring experience as well, if that makes sense. So when you step into the work, there is something that's possible to be reconstellated, regrown through the engagement, through the encounter, which I feel is what the astrological practice is as well.
Well, when you were describing that, I feel like there's sort of a drawing together of, like, as you're describing that, I feel like walking into this field and feeling like a drawing together of several different parts of the self that are sort of like always ready perhaps to create together, but always treated as though they're separate and isolated parts of the self. And when you're describing this, I'm like, I feel sort of an orchestral, like musical component to what you're saying. And like, I could feel parts saying like, oh yeah, we could all be in an orchestra together in this, or we could all be playing separate instruments, but the same tune together as we were to connect with this particular field. That's what's coming up for me listening.
Yeah, beautiful. Like we're being strung.
Yeah.
We're played.
Yeah.
And through that, we can take many different shapes. And that fluidity and that flexibility and dimensionality, I think, is one of the many beauties of the astrological art. That we are so multiple and dimensional And it was Whitman who said, we are made, do I contradict myself? Very well. I am made of multiples.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that it gives full permission for that scope of breadth and diversity. And so, yeah, the work, the making component has a correlative quality as to how I experience and practice and teach astrology.
Beautiful. And, you know, we are heading into this ninth house together, but I don't know how you feel about revelations of parts of your chart. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah. So we both have sort of a ninth house focal point, don't we? Which I feel is interesting because I can feel the way we connected through the ninth. You know, from the very first meeting, it was like, oh, hi. And then we sort of immediately entered ninth house consciousness together and wandered around in there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. That kind of, so I have a ninth house sun in Aquarius. And that discovering that has created more and more leaning in and becoming of that placement, as astrology can do. And yeah, I feel like there's a way in which when you have a ninth house connection, you kind of are in another realm of reflection, another way in which you are. It's pontification, but it's not in a way that is detached, I feel. Like it's in which there was a generative sparking and exploring and holding something and letting it reverberate, like holding it or holding an idea or an astrological tenet and letting it reverberate. And enrich and embellish and become more velvety than just a kind of thing that's known.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, like I have my Mercury and Jupiter conjunct at the same degree in Leo there, so which is an interesting shape that we have, which is both the ninth house placements, but because of the shape of our chart, they're in opposition, but they're both in the ninth house, which is kind of a cool dimensionality to, you know, what I guess resounds between us. But I remember, as a little anecdote to that for me, when 20 plus years ago, I was getting into Osho quite a lot and listening to his recordings, and I was really enjoying it, actually. And then there was one thing he said that I've like vehemently disagreed with. Like, it was just this one particular thing. And the idea was that life is essentially meaningless, but we bring meaning to it. We create meaning from it. And I feel like it's this part of my chart that just could not be with that description of life. I found it quite sort of almost lazy in a way, and the opposite was true to me. I felt the truth was that life is incredibly richly meaningful, but then we ignore it, or we go numb to it, or we close it off. But like every micro moment is so rich with and packed with meaning. And what I hear in what you're saying as well is like, now the bringing out of that meaning and the participating in the fullness of that and allowing that to come through and out. Now that's a different thing, but I think that's what the mythic world has really helped me to do, is to see a substructure of reality that is so rich and so full of meaning. So I remember I never let that one go. You know, like I still today can remember it as like the idea that life is essentially meaningless, but then we bring meaning or make meaning of it or to it. It was like, absolutely not. It was like my ninth house could not be with that idea.
Yeah, it's desiccating.
That's what it feels like. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the things I feel about the ninth. It's like it recovers from a lot of the conditioning. It has a, it's a place where
Hmm.
we can rip and strip conditioning and recover connection.
Hmm.
And when there's connection, there's, like you say, a wellstorm of meaning. Like everything is intelligent and speaking and alive and available for that kind of way of being in reciprocal relationship.
Yeah, and almost like a magnetism and a movement of meanings that pull things together and pull things out. And yeah, that can have its shadow side to it, right? Of course, it can have an element of like things being overly laden with meaning. I can see that side of it. But ultimately, the the richness of life, and this is what I think the mythic world, certainly since starting to work with Brian, however many years ago, I think it's like 5 years ago for both of us, isn't it? Because I think we started working with him around the same time, and just it's like changing that perception, it's changing that perceptual field, or how you're taking in the information that it's around. In fact, how you're listening to not just the people talking, because it definitely changed my practice by being able to listen with much more of like an ear for what was really being said,
Yeah.
and a patience with the unconscious to stumble through wordings and stumble through statements, but then hear within that stumbling what the real undertone of meaning and consciousness was, what it's really trying to say, how the unconscious is really trying to move through at any given time. And that listening into just the slips of the tongue or the hermetic styles or something that just comes through, and being able to elaborate on that and bring it forward, I think it's been a really beautiful way of working, right? Because we're all speaking in tongues.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. And I think for me, the ninth is about those modes of consciousness, of which the mythic consciousness is one mode of consciousness that can hear through. And
Hmm.
I don't know if you've heard of the notion of the third ear, but that's something that Martin Shaw has often kind of a British writer who writes a lot with myth
Mm-hmm.
and he, I don't know if he's the one who coined it, but this notion of the third ear as a way to hear through and to hear that mythic reverberation, which is, can be said in many ways, different ways, but it's that the depth, the always available to feel the magnitude of what is present. And
Mm.
I feel consciousness and states of consciousness and ways of cultivating consciousness is such a ninth house um, preoccupation. Certainly, it's been a preoccupation in my ninth house Aquarian existence.
Yeah. Yeah. I like this third ear. I think I've only heard it maybe from you, unless I've heard it elsewhere. But yeah, I like this idea of a third ear. Um, and it's interesting because, of course, like as I'm quite visual, I have the third eye and I can feel where that would be. I'm wondering where the
Mm,
third ear might be, though. That's the kind of, and what it even looks like a third ear. Because again, with an eye, I can see it. I think most people listening will be able to know where their third eye is.
yeah,
And yet with
yeah.
the third ear, I'm not sure where that might be.
That's such a interesting. I'm finding myself hovering a little bit.
Yeah, unsure. Yeah.
Located, and is it actually kind of on the head or is it somewhere else or
Yeah, I'm not sure. The first hunch that I have of it is that it's in the back of the head, like around the brainstem there, in the occipital lobe back there. That's where I'm sort of sensing I may listen from. But I guess
yeah,
it's kind of a question for you and for audience to feel that and maybe take a moment to feel that for yourself where, because I think everybody knows where the third eye is, and maybe that's just because we have that conditioning, or maybe the third eye actually lives there. Um, but yeah, where is this third ear?
I think that's yeah, there's something about the behind and
Yeah.
the back and the ninth feels a kind of a place where you repose, where you lean back, where you look up, where you
Yeah.
open.
I had a client once that said after a session that we were in that was quite deep, she mentioned 360-degree listening. Um,
Mm.
and that's a nice one because I do feel it needs to be in the back there to pick up all those extra nuances and sounds, which aligns so well with process-oriented psychotherapy because you're really listening in for not just the channels of awareness that we're used to, but the other channels, including the synchronous channels, right? Like what's happening while we're having this conversation and the things that normally in everyday consciousness we shove out because it's not for us to think that way or whatever it is, like we need to be focused. But in focusing
Yeah.
so much, we can miss out on those other things. So part of the training in process work is to listen with other faculties, including your own body, including the synchronous channel, including if somebody brings up a person, then that person isn't just randomly, like that person has entered your conversation, they're here, right? Rather than it just being like they're talking about someone, whoever it is has suddenly entered and a whole being is suddenly with us. These kinds of ways of listening to what the person's really saying.
It's so beautiful because I always feel the front of the body goes forward. It's like forward focused, and then it's like, the kind of tread and the kind of just keeping on going. Whereas the back has a whole different quality of pace and presence and spaciousness that hasn't got that forward momentum where you actually miss so much. Like it's
Yeah.
quite linkered. So I love that notion of back listening and other modes of receiving. And in
Yeah.
Chinese, it's the yin field. The
Hmm.
behind is the yin as well, which is where we have expansive faculties available to the quieter or the darker or the more kind of nebulous.
Hmm.
And I kind of feel as we're here, we are in these qualities of the ninth house with the joys and its relationship with the third. I feel like these are ways to be in those astrological associations and
Hmm.
qualities.
And can you open that for us, the joys, and because of course within the series, we have talked quite a lot about the joys, but maybe you can just give us a feel, maybe even like take that step back, like following the cue of that back body, like what does it mean to you for the joys? I don't mean the text and specs here. I just mean like what does it feel like to you to talk about the joys of the houses, and then
Mm,
maybe bring that into the ninth or wherever you want to go with it.
mm. I have found the joys really illuminating. Rather than a telling, I find them revealing. And so, each of the planets has a joy somewhere. And it helps to feel the atmosphere of the house that where they may be at joy. So the sun having its joy in the ninth and the moon having its joy in the third. There's a kind of way in which sitting with that, this solar quality and this ninth house quality, how do they open each other up more when we just sit with that question of the sun loves to be in the ninth
Hmm.
and the light that the sun radiates and the extensive reach of the sun's radiation and its rays that pierce and penetrate, not always, but it's a kind of ubiquitous, extensive glow.
Hmm.
Um, and the ninth, how does that reveal something about the ninth as an atmosphere, as a mode of consciousness, as a state of being? And it's that helps to kind of the joys help to illuminate that for me,
Mm.
or add another facet, or turn the archetypal jewel in a different way to show us something in a more felt phenomenon way.
I'm getting a sense of why is the sun so happy here. And a few things spring to mind. It's like there's a lot of room up here. That's what it feels like to me, like the sun being so enormous. Classically 99.98% of the mass of the solar system is just the sun, right? So you get that enormity of the sun and how much it can really stretch out here, like it doesn't feel contained. I mean, it's equally high in the sky in the 10th house, but you can feel how it would feel contained and there's kind of stuff to do there. I feel like in the night it can stretch out, it can ponder, it can just like take its time. It can just, I'm imagining the sun just kind of like, I'm just going to take this in. I've got a few hours here just to really, soak in all of this in a way.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking about if I have a time, a moment in my day-to-day life that is very ninth house, it's like I've got a cup of tea and I've got my book and I've got, and I've got time and there's not much on and I can just like absorb something philosophical or something, mythical and really be with the words and not have to rush from like this to that to that. I've got to finish this page, get that done, write an essay, send that off. I have like a real stretching out. I'm kind of imagining the sun as like almost a cartoon sun here that can stretch out its arms and just take up the space of this house.
Yeah. Radiate. And
Yeah.
its own warmth and enjoy its own luminosity.
Yeah.
And enjoy its reflective, like seeing that kind of way that the light falls on things and illuminates things, and it exposes or shows or lingers. It's a place of lingering, I feel, where kind of burning bright and moving along is more the 10th.
Yeah.
And then the losing of the lingering is
Right.
more of the, oh God, I'm going down, whereas there's something about lingering in the ninth, which I think the sun really pleasures in.
Yeah. And I'm imagining Helios there with his sun chariot and getting to this point of the sky. And he's done all of the hard work of the climb that started at the ascendant when he came up, rising and rising up to the top of the sky. And then those horses are there sweating and they've been doing all that work, those 4 horses that have been pulling the sun, and all the work that's taken and the strength that's taken. And then it gets to the midheaven and then it's like, the horses are relaxing. Helios is relaxing, the whole chariot's relaxing, the world is kind of like, okay, like even from the Chinese medicine perspective, this is when baby yin time is here, right? Like this is a time of the day where it's like rest and, take a little bit of a break at this time of the day, because the little break that you take now will feed you a better sleep at night because you build your baby yin at this time of the day. You just take a little rest here because like you got to the midheaven, that's all you really needed to do today. And now you're just like, like coasting in this part of the sky, I'm just coasting for a while.
Yeah, repose comes notion of, but also the kind of making something from, but not in an urgent way, but in this more reflective reverie kind of way. Like it has a lot to do with reverie. I think it has a lot to do with reverence as well, and reflection in a different way to the moon, but as a contemplative, and taking time with things and making something of, like, kind of digesting and then alchemizing to then really feel what's been going on. It's all this endeavoring, and then this place where you can take time with the endeavoring.
Yeah.
And I love this image of it, almost like a kind of, a sun that's sort of blobbing a bit,
Yeah.
spreading out. Yeah.
And there's a joy in that, like, look at this, everything is light, It's kind of like, look at this, look at the earth now. Like, what it's looking at is everything is bright and light here and clear, and there's a clarity to it all. And we're a long way from things being kind of disturbing or confusing. It's like a lot of that is burnt away at this point. It's like, there's a crystallization of things going on here.
Mm.
And I'm feeling that in the movement between, obviously the opposite house is the third, as you said, the lunar light, and the moon having its joy down there. And Cameron Allen was on here on the third house episode. We really felt like we were wandering around in the nighttime with the full moon out. It was also a beautiful episode of exploration.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, from the joy of the moon is everything's a much closer. The moon's glow is like a silver blanket, and it's the immediate relations and tending to those spirits and those kind of where all of our relations with the human and the more than human in the immediate sense, like our locale, and tending and caring for those, and that cultivating kin with the human and the more than human, but in a much more local way, and much more kind of immediate. And I kind of feel like hedge witches and, people who are really close to the earth and the plants and the waters and the spirits, and really, but that in doing that, you keep that more patterning of what it is to be human to the ninth. That there's a way in which those caring for those immediate relations help us to formulate and feel in a more when I say philosophical, I don't mean a detached philosophical sense of the ninth, but that reach that the ninth offers to extend, to connect to some kind of bigger notion of existence. But it comes from that third, caring for, cultivating kin, being close with, and that kind of lunar cloaking glow. Do you feel that?
Yeah, I'm feeling like we're moving down into the third to what's at hand, and then we're moving up into the ninth of like the broadcast, in a sense of like, okay, we've got this, this is important information that's like everybody can get some sunlight from, right? I'd like to share this, and then coming back so that we can come back to the third of like, can I still touch it? Can I still feel that? Yeah. Does it make sense down here? Because if it starts not making sense down here, then it's going to just kind of like a helium balloon. It's going to float off. It's going to float away from the earthly realm. And I think that connection, like all of these things, all of these houses, as we go through the second half of the house system, it's been beautiful to see that connection with its opposite. Whether that's with the seventh house of we meet the other, but if we're not connected to the self, then we're going to get lost in a myriad of ways, And we meet the eighth house we're heading to the underworld, but if I don't have the resources of the second, then I might get petrified, or all sorts of manner of things can happen there if I don't have my resources with me. Or when we're in the our stuff, I should also feel into what's mine here, what's my stuff. And then as we move into the ninth, also feeling that, like that connectedness between the big mind of the ninth and the big ideas and really the mysteries of the universe that we're trying to work out together in a way. Like, what does this all actually mean? And then connecting that down to like the everyday consciousness, the what's at hand, and that experience. And what sprung into my mind actually is living in London for a few years in my 20s and going through, I think it's Hyde Park, and people are on the soapbox with people around them, literally with a box upside down. It may not be Hyde Park, but anyway, I love
Speaker's Corner.
Speaker's
Yeah.
Corner. Is that
Yeah.
still a thing?
Yeah, it is.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. But that kind of thing of like, I'm going to stand on this little platform here and I'm going to start speaking, you know, like this is, I loved that. I loved just kind of, I wonder what this guy's got to say.
Yeah. And like that basic elevation, like you say, just a box
Just
or
a box, yeah.
something. There was
Yeah.
elevation.
Just slightly higher. Yeah, I'm going to broadcast this now, but really it's just I'm going to stand on this box here and start to speak. And then people are gathering around like, oh, what's this guy got to say? And it's like the marketplace of ideas. You know, if you don't like it, you walk away and go to hear someone else. But it's so audacious, the ninth, in a way, isn't it? To say like, I got something that I think people want to hear.
Yeah. And it wants to reach both within itself and others. You know, there's that kind of desire to reach in all the realms, I feel like.
Yeah.
The most kind of expanded, extended way.
It is so interesting because I think, you know, before we got on air, before we started up, we were just having a chat, Amanda and I, and one of the images that came through was Hestia and the internal flame, and the Olympic torch as an image for the ninth, which in the ancient times would be the fire, the hearth that was in, I believe it was in Athens, from the capital. They would light the torch from that hearth and make sure that it didn't go out and go all the way to Olympia, which is a very long way if you don't have cars and trucks and things. So the movement of that torch and the keeping of that flame alive, and then once they would get to Olympia, they would light Hestia's temple first, which was the central temple of most of the ancient world. Really, they'd have the Hesterion, or whatever it is, the Hestia's main temple, where the light of the capital is brought over. And I feel like this, as you say, reaching, what brought this to mind again was like reaching, as you said, out into the world, but deep into the eternal flame internally, because we all have the sun inside and we're reaching for the sun. We're seeing if this sun inside has the same kind of thing that the sun has, you know?
Yeah, that, you know, the symbol of the circle with the dot in the middle and what that evokes in terms of the internal sun and the external sun.
Yeah.
But I think that's so evocative, Chris, because as we were talking before as well, it's like these houses are places in our life. They're experiences that we are familiar or less familiar with. And they are the way in which the celestial becomes tethered to the terrestrial. Like that's what the houses offer, is that real felt sense of our particular celestial configuration and how it meets a particular terrestrial configuration. And there's something about that Hestia, hearth making, creating the ground, feeling the warmth of that third house cultivation, and then how a spark gets taken and falls, and like a torch illuminates some little passage into mystery and into it's almost like, you know, going into the cave paintings, how they would have experienced the cave paintings is possibly with a torch, and then just like illuminating it in this partial way, because it's always partial in the ninth. Each person's endeavor, it's always a partial illumination of the mystery, or making visible some aspect of the mystery, but it's never a complete revelation.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about how, you know, somebody like a sort of, let's say a Jung in the 20th century, right? Like with everything that he's exploring inside of his consciousness, and then in the collective unconscious, and everything that he's taking himself into, like whether that's building the tower at Bellingen and spending time alone in there in that tower, where people are just bringing him food so he can just stay alive, and he stays in there for as long as he can with the tower that he built stone for stone, right? He laid it down stone for stone, and he finds himself just in there because he needs to be in the darkness of that tower in order to explore the deepest of his own sun. So he needs to have sort of like no interaction from anything external in order to go deep enough into his own consciousness and therefore find consciousness of the universe, and then bring it out and have that ability to say, like, right, I have to start writing and I have to start teaching. I mean, gave his whole life to that, left behind so much information. And then what else he left behind is the Jungians, right? Like he left behind a whole lineage of people that are then expanding on his works and finding their own way to their inner sun. And, the best of the Jungians are the ones that have followed not what Jung did, but followed the interior path that he was pointing to and discovered their own sun, right?
Yeah.
And then shared out of that and found that there's a receiving of that, because the sun, that's the other thing about the sun, right? It requires these other planetary bodies to receive the warmth. It even requires the moon to receive that warmth. And without that, there is a bit like what I said before of what Osho said. It's like it's essentially meaningless. But with the light of the sun animating everything, it becomes very rich. It's just that warmth of that deep interiority. It's like, I know something. I think that's the thing about the night that comes out and says, hey, like those guys at Speaker's Corner. They're like, I know something, and I'm going to turn this box around and stand on this and just start talking.
Yeah. I think that's so beautiful, because that it may or may not be received in this lifetime.
Exactly, yeah.
But often or sometimes those kind of inspirations of the ninth and those illuminations of the ninth, whether they take shape in music, writing, poetic writing, visual making, or whatever, those ways that those illuminations take shape may or may not be able to be received by current culture.
Yeah.
They are blazing something.
Yeah.
There's so many, whether it was Van Gogh or whether it was Cézanne, blazed with their vision.
Yes.
And creations. I mean, those are just very obvious. There's many others, and yet they are now recognized as trailblazers.
Yeah.
And that their vision was clearing and opening into something new.
And piercing as well, because it's something that you said before, like the difference of the lunar light and the solar light. You said about the rays. I mean, this was because Amanda and I have just been going back and forth to wax ideas and just see what would come through. But when you mentioned that the sun has those penetrating rays versus the silver illumination of the moon, it is the penetrating, like it is something about that in the night that wants to penetrate into the mystery. And it's the third of those firehouses that is like, okay, I've got the self from the first. I've got the sense of the individuality and what my thing is in the fifth, and now in the ninth, it is like that fire wants to blaze. It wants to be a bonfire. It wants to warm, and it wants to really create and then disseminate the fire. That's why I think this Hestia and the Olympic torch is a good image for the ninth. It's like light from this and take it forward, sort of thing. And of course, there's the tragedy of ninth house consciousness. It's like nobody wants to hear that, because these figures that you mentioned, and there's many more, it's like the pain of like nobody wants to know. Nobody wants to hear that. But you never know, do you? If it's like, maybe it could be lifetimes, maybe it could be future generations, which is another audacious thing to have in mind. Like, other people, imagine Van Gogh, like, other people here don't understand,
Yeah.
but I must keep going. I must keep making my paintings, even though no one ever wants to buy them.
Yeah. I think that's a key thing about ninth house consciousness is conviction,
Yeah.
and that it burns with its own conviction. And that can be harmful, but it can also be the absolute necessity for cultural consciousness
Oh
renewal.
my God, what an epic double-edged sword conviction is. Now that you say, when you said it can be harmful, it's like, wow, many, many illustrations through history where that level of conviction is absolutely harmful. And yet, where would we be without those levels of conviction in those that have brought forth the vision?
Yeah. 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 And I think all of that really holding the joy of the sun really helps to feel all of that, like
Yeah.
conviction, vision, the penetration, the blazing,
Mm.
and and the kind of burn of that, both internally and externally. And suddenly the ninth house is like open. So I hope everyone's feeling that as they're listening, in terms of the opening of that space in your life and wherever else you encounter it, whether it's the immediate people you're in relationship with or other practitioners, or it's it's so helpful to have that felt sense of this place and how it lives
Mm.
through, or how it maybe is impinged upon and could be helped to fluoresce.
Yeah, what it might be like to help this house out, right? If you do feel sort of things that maybe are stuck in this house, or you can't get to this house, or something's inhibiting, which I think is quite a common human experience, right? Because I think the thing about the ninth is, like, there's 8 houses before it if we're going this way in the zodiac, right? Like, it's quite a journey we've been through, and plus we have to have made it through the 8th even to get in here, right? In a way, right? That we have to have gone through something. That this is the place of rebirth. It's not the place of birth, but it is the place of rebirth, But all of the fire houses have a birthing component to them. But the ninth is like a birthing of that grand vision, like the Pegasus that comes from Medusa and is suddenly a horse that can fly. Or even the brother of Pegasus, the Chrysol with the golden flaming sword. That's a great vision that's a great symbol for a penetrating vision and a fierce discernment that we sometimes need in the ninth. Like, if we're going to, one of the things I'm going to bring through in the fairy tale, the juniper tree, is like a bird that speaks the truth just as it is, as plainly as it is, just speaks it. And then people want to hear. It's interesting because I'll talk about it next week, but people want to hear. He sings his song, and then people come out. Can you sing it again? And he's like, no, I will only sing it for free once. If you want to hear it again, you got to pay. And this kind of like this valuing, this valuing of the vision as well. It's like, no, now we're really moving with this,
Yeah. But I think that's also because you've been through an ordeal. The 8th is the ordeal, and the place where it's been sticky, it's been like laboring in a kind of, physical, visceral way. Like, it's not a place that you kind of just breeze through.
No.
And it's almost like by coming through the 8th, you've earned the ninth in a way. And I don't mean that in a kind of moralistic way. I just mean that an ordeal has been experienced in the 8th.
Yeah, I would say not moralistic at all. It's just that the boon, like, I do think the ninth has something to do with the boon that we receive from the underworld, and that's just, some straight up Joseph Campbell language there. But once we have gone through the dark night of the soul journey, we do come back with the boon, in this hero's journey sort of model, and to bring that boon and have it received is really the next point. That's the return, right? So we go from the separation through the ordeal to the return. That's the basic process of initiation. And when we return with our boon, it's really important that's received by the world around us. And I think that's why, now that we're talking about it actually, and it's really coming alive for me, I think there's a collective ninth house wound from the noise in the ninth. Right? Like the sort of oversaturation of anybody can just jump on with a camera and say the thing. And that means that, well, I probably don't have my thing to say because you're comparing it to like the endless amounts of noise going on here. That's on the one level. And on the other level, I think we go through the separation, that's for sure. We go through the ordeal, that's for sure. But when do we do the return? You know, I thought that was the great tragedy of COVID. Is that we went through the separation, that was clear. We went through the ordeal, that was clear. When did we have a return?
Yeah.
We sort of never returned to say like, hey, and we're all in it together again, you know, like, hey, that was pretty full on, you know, that's what happens in the ninth. And like, here's what I learned. Here's what I developed. Here's my boon from going through such an extraordinary thing.
Yeah. Collectively. Yeah.
And then instead it was like, just get back, you know,
resurrect,
just go. Yeah. Like, and all this talk about normal and new normal and things. It's like, what? Is that the best we can do? You know, that shows a cultural deficiency in the ability to understand meaning behind events.
Yes. Yeah. And the poverty of that.
The poverty. The collapsed Pegasus, you know, the Pegasus with a broken wing that comes out of Medusa and then falls to the floor.
Yeah. And I think that has something to do with like what's happened to the tendency to dwell with things, to stay with things, to linger with things, to mull and muse on things. You know, just keep the apparatus, you know, resurrect and keep going. And I think the poverty is in like taking time to muse and mull, which is the potential of the ninth if we value it.
So this is kind of like to come back to the image of the sun being able to stretch out here. And the way that you're talking about it there, I'm like, yeah, it's this like, okay, go. You know, we fell behind in our production.
Exactly.
Let's get better.
10.
Which is 10. So we're skipping the ninth, just like we talked about before about jumping over the 8th to get to the ninth from the 7th. You know, like here I am in the 7th. I don't want to go through anything too tricky here, so I'll just jump into the ninth of meaning, and we just drop platitudes on everybody. But the same thing can happen when we come out of the 8th and we just get the machine rolling again. We miss the ninth, and I wonder if there's a way to feel that in the house system of like skipped houses, and what happens when we skip houses. Yeah.
We don't grow soul. We don't grow our humanness.
Yeah. And as such, we're sort of doomed to the Sisyphus story. You know, we therefore that rock is going to keep rolling down the hill, and we're going to have to just go back down and push the damn thing up again. Because the soul, and of course, you know, I talked about this with Melanie when we were talking 8th house of Sisyphus chaining up death, and that's his punishment. But in this way, we're going from like, he's also in the underworld, so he's got the underworld, but he goes straight into the work of the 10th. You know, he's got to try to get this thing up the hill. Whereas wouldn't it be beautiful when Orpheus is playing his music coming down to the underworld? Of course, that's the one moment that Sisyphus stops, and he sits on his rock and he contemplates. And the same is true with Tantalus, who's forever hungry and thirsty, but just for a second he stops hunger and thirst and he just listens to Orpheus's music.
Wow, that takes me back into third ear discussion as well as mythic consciousness of like, you have to take time to hear. If you're just moving on into production. You like Orpheus is not, you're not taking time to be with,
Hmm.
you're not making space, time, slowing down for the Orphic moment.
The Orphic moment. Yeah, it's like that's the one thing Orpheus doesn't do, right? He's like, I'm not going to just let Eurydice go and get back to my life.
Yeah, yeah,
And instead he follows her path, you know. So he sings the song that reverberates through the ages that we still know about Orpheus's journey to the underworld in a way because and maybe that's how we reach out from the ninth and touch the spirit, because I do think this is a house of spirit. You know, we connect to the spirit that connects us all, that we're all in, that ultimately the ninth house shows us in a way that no other house can. I think that we're all in the same story.
yeah. We're all part of existence.
Yeah. We might be seeing a different side of the story and we might be interpreting it differently and we might be seeing it from my angle. But the ninth house at its best tells us that, yeah, and you're seeing that and you're in a greater story that we're all in.
Yeah, yeah. And I also feel, Chris, that works with the houses moving the diurnal motion, because you mentioned the zodiacal motion up from the seventh into the 8th, but I also feel it works with the diurnal motion of the sun, that in order to passage well through the 8th, gathering what this life is for and what ordeals are for, and what it is to be worked by life and what it is to experience adversity, helps us to really like work with whatever the experiences of the 8th house is. If we've taken time to consider, contemplate, cultivate in that more ninth house way, we can meet the ordeals. It doesn't mean that resilient in a way that we don't get broken, but it helps us to metabolize and make meaningful what it is that we're experiencing if we've given time to considering the human journey, the human experience, and the vaster story we're in, and human endeavor we're up to. So I really feel like that skipping in both ways is so detrimental.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, that's I guess that's the Viktor Frankl.
Man's search for meaning.
Yeah, man's search for meaning, you know. And in a sense, talking about this horrific moment in history, the Holocaust and everything that went on, but those who took meaning with them to such an intensely underworld experience had such different time there, right?
Yeah.
Than those that lost touch with the ninth, going this diurnal direction, going this way from the ninth to the 8th. It's almost like with meaning still intact, we can actually, we're pretty resilient creatures when the spirit is strong. You know, we can make it through that. And when we perceive that light goes out, that's the great tragedy, right? And of course, from my craniosacral work, it's one of the great things to do with people, especially when there's exhaustion in the system or overwhelm or shutdown, is to bring back Hestia and the idea that light actually can't go out.
Yeah.
That's the impossibility. It may be extraordinarily faint, that light, but if we go in, you know, this is one thing to go in with the craniosacral feeling function and get right to the middle of it, and we'll find a light there, maybe a tiny flickering candle that feels like it's about to go out, but the fact that Hestia does represent that eternal flame is a reminder that no matter how bad it is, that flame is still in there somewhere.
It's inviolable. There is dogma, which is inviolable, unable to be extinguished.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also feel like the triad of the 1st and the 5th and the 9th helps us in that way as well, because that creates a kind of fortitude in that triangulation, that the ninth conversation with the fifth, and the fifth is in a conversation by trine, by 180 degrees with the first. And so there's something that's building between those, in those.
Can I invite you to go on a little riff here and enter first, fifth, ninth, and just sort of take us through those houses? Because some of my audience might be like, what are they talking about with the first and the fifth? Maybe you've heard the earlier episodes, maybe you haven't. Is it possible to ask you to riff there?
Yeah, sure. And I would like to credit Brian here, because Brian is someone who really has spent time in these triads of houses. And so these triads of houses help us to feel the connectivity between these areas of life, having a similar orientation and preoccupation, I would say. So a really helpful one, or easy one, I'll start with, is the 3rd, the 7th, and the 11th. They create a triad by trine, and they are all the relational houses. The 3rd is a particular relational environment, the 7th is another particular relational environment, and the 11th. And so each of the triads, the 4th, the 12th, and the 8th, has another kind of dimension of consciousness and atmosphere. So the 1st and the 5th and the 9th has so much to do with the way I experience it, and the way I notice it and listen for it, is how we are growing that orientation in terms of the helm of our life, and desires and pleasures that we're hungry for, and the things that we're creating, and how those get composed and considered and deepened in the 9th. So it's like our fundamental core. It's like our kind of North Star dimension to it. It's got that, how we are crafting and coursing through life, and we can track it in these different ways between the 1st, the 5th, and the 9th. And that kind of fundamental spirit, soul, body matrix of how we're organized in our living in some way, but through these different facets of our creations, our pleasures, our joys, how we kind of organize ourselves on a psycho-spiritual way in the 1st, and how we kind of meet the world, that we step out. And then the 9th, in terms of how we grow all of that through the learning that we do, or the contemplation that we do, or the practices that we have, whether those are breathing practices, or they're other ritual practices, or they're other things that we invest in to grow and cultivate connection to the bigger story. So does that help to feel into that triad a bit?
Yeah, the thing that occurred to me as you were talking about it is this boldness that each of these houses has, because the first is like the boldness to go like, yes, I'm going to go get incarnated,
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to just like go down there and let's do it. Let's do life. That's such an original, bold move to come from the 12th oceanic, nothing is anything kind of consciousness, where you could just be part of the entire collective unconscious and not have to be a self. And then bang, that first fire of the first, like, that's such a bold move. Then the 5th house has the boldness of stepping out of the home environment, where everything is safe, or maybe not, but either way, stepping out of your home matrix and going like, I'm going to step out into my own life of the 5th, and I'm going to go after what I desire and what I want, and how bold that is. And each one has its sort of like potential backlash, either from the family or from the collective unconscious. There's like, you can't go out there on your own, And then the boldness of the 9th to say like, I've been through something, and I've got something from what I've been through, and I want to share it, and I want to step up into, like, I want to step onto the soapbox, and I want to share it with you. And the you could be a big you or a small you, but in one sense, it's like, I have something here, And there's a boldness to that, to say, you know, of all of the human experiences, that your thing is worth sharing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the eighth house could also drag you back and go, no, you don't.
Yeah.
If we're going in that direction. Yeah.
Yeah. I hear, what I hear in that is I am, I want, I know,
Yeah. Yeah.
in a very crude way, but
Yeah.
and the best form of knowing is the direct experience knowing. Well, I think personally, I should say, you know, like I know through direct experience of having been through this journey, and then I want, I desire, I love, I am attracted to for the fifth, and then I am in like, wow, I'm here. Okay.
Yeah.
Like you say, I've landed. Um, And then there's an elemental sharing between those three as well. So for you, it's fire, and for me, it's air.
Hmm.
And so they have this quality of elemental, um, different qualities of the elemental within those triads as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be very, very connecting, I find, for life's various forms of living.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that connectivity of like so because we're in the ninth, maybe that meaning, connecting to the sense of selfhood of the I am, connecting to what I love and what my desires are, and making sure those three are coherent with each other, and they are with each other, you know. And that could also help to balance out either, you know, the potential narcissism of the first, the potential hedonism of the fifth, right? And the potential dogma of the ninth. It's like they all get, it's like, well, if you're going dogmatic, you're probably not really enjoying it in the way, you know, that you're probably not in touch with your desires as you once were. And you're creating a dogmatic scene here. And maybe you're also not in touch with the self that is it, right? Like you can feel how they would be checks and balances within these triads.
I think that's a really crucial and critical way to be with them. I think it
Yeah.
really helps to feel that they're a force of life together.
Mm.
And you don't, like you say, become a helium balloon in any one of those ones that becomes detached and overinflated, and loses the sense that it's part of these concentric stories of being drawn into life and being drawn into whatever it is that our human is here for. I think they really help in that way as well. Um,
Yeah, all of these houses are indicators for that, aren't they? They're indicators of what your human self is here for.
and I think in all the ways that we have like touched on, whether it's with the ninth or the third and the Mobius strip of that dance, and remembering how connected they are there, or whether it's through these motions from the 10th to the ninth to the 8th, or the 7th to the 8th to the ninth. That's another way in which that is illuminated, or you can feel the iteration in that, or in this triading. That's why they're so rich to really sit with, in their light, their motion, how they're connected to each other, and what these way stations are for our human existence. Yeah.
So beautiful. I mean, I have already 15 other dream doors that I want to go into, but I can feel us sort of like slowly entering the final phase of our conversation. So I feel like as the one at the helm of the conversation, I better make a point of that. But before we do that, there's a word that you brought up and that we haven't touched on yet, which I'd love to hear, because I feel the passion in you talking about this concept of Téchnē, and how that relates. Firstly, what is that? What does that word mean? And then how does that relate to the ninth house here?
So maybe there's some kind of strands I can pick up from some of the things, but to draw them more into this notion, in the way in which the ninth is remembering it's part of a bigger web of life, a bigger web of consciousness, a bigger story, the mythic mode, this third ear sensitivity. There's ways that help us stay in close connection with that. There's processes, there's practices, there's all sorts of Téchnē that have been cultivated through time. So I think of Téchnē in the form of a process or a practice or a technology before it was co-opted by the digital realm. And, there's so many modes of that, whether it's a pencil is a form of technology that allowed us to kind of create a reach into the breach or breach the reach, or practices of breathing or practices of yoga or practices of our felt sense with our hands, like with cranial sacral, or all of these are Téchnē. They're all forms of growing sensitivity to the connection to the larger web, the larger pulse, the larger frequency, the larger patterns, and the larger throb of mystery and consciousness. And so for me, the ninth is about like, where do you resonate more? Like, is your resonance with reading philosophical scriptural texts? Or is your resonance with going on pilgrimage to sacred sites and being in that kind of direct experience and direct knowing? That everyone's soma, third house, somatic sense, has a different resonance to that connection. And the different resonance is the Téchnē, all the modes of Téchnē that are available or that people keep growing for that feeling close to that resonance. And so for me, making work is one of those Téchnē. For someone else, it might be singing. But they're all things that you do in a repeated, patterned way in order to hear the rhythm and pattern of this greater weave, or to get closer to it, or to come closer to it. That's how does that resonate?
Yeah, for sure. I'm thinking now about, say, the returning to the myths, as it's been for me, of seeing patterns and repeating patterns within myths or fairy tales, and just kind of like going back again and again and again, to keep returning, because I think it's a really important element of ninth house, actually, because I think of it more as a sixth house thing, as the rhythms and the routines, but actually it's ninth house in the sense that it's like what ultimately gives us the structure and the framework, and what we put in place to continue to expand our minds in ways that can continue to expand, right? Like rather than getting the big Zeus's lightning bolt of flash of inspiration, and then that's it. Now I know that, but then I don't have anywhere to put that. And I think many of us would have had a flash of inspiration, sudden knowing, sudden revelation, but maybe not the structure or the container or the containment of that I think this Téchnē piece that you're talking about gives us the sense of, like, well, maybe even like this is my style of writing, or this is my style of art in your case, or, perhaps the podcast has been a form of that for me, to be like, this is what I do. I have conversations and I let this come out, and that's how I'm going to learn, is to do this ninth house thing of broadcast. And then developing that over time, which is kind of like there's a vulnerability to it, isn't there? Because one has to continue to come back to whether that's the empty page, the blank page, or the canvas, or the emptiness, and kind of keep turning back up there. It's like, well, I hope this works again, I hope this actually goes somewhere. And then again and again, when you recognize that it does, it's like, okay, so I have a it has a form to it. It's not just a
Yeah.
chaotic bunch of things. It has a form to it.
I think that's a really beautiful thing to bring into the ninth as well, is there is a vulnerability here.
Yeah.
And, and there is a humbleness as well, actually, by showing up again to do the ritual, by
Yeah.
showing up again to do the pilgrimage, by showing up again and doing the prayer.
Yeah.
And they're all ways for me to kind of create the possibility for a reciprocal relationship with the more than human.
Hmm.
And this notion of like two-way touch, like how do we touch in and be touched by? How do we make ourselves available and receptive to that?
Hmm.
Is through finding these Téchnē that are right for our particular psycho-spiritual system,
Hmm.
whether that is the podcast or, all the versions that I've given,
Hmm.
and just be dedicated to those. There is something about dedication, humility, vulnerability, and offering oneself in order to be offered back to.
Hmm.
And so that's some of how I really feel Téchnē. It's that becoming available to the reciprocal relations and two-way touch. But they're separate from everyday. There's something, they're
Yeah.
slightly separated out from the day-to-day of the 10th endeavoring.
Or
And I
the
think that
sixth, as I was bringing up there. So it's not necessarily just routines and rituals here. It's a well, I was going to say maybe building a ladder to the Olympian realms or to the upper world. And now the image, like very famous image, is coming to me of the Sistine Chapel and Michelangelo's image there of the reaching of the finger, out for the god, and that beautiful space in between those fingers of the god and the man, and yeah, very ninth house image actually.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm.
Because that's what we're really doing in the ninth, isn't it? I feel like we're reaching for the mind of God. We're reaching for that highest, and words like highest can have their own thing, but I think they, in this context, a very useful word. It's the highest of the knowings, and we're reaching from our human condition out to the all-knowing one, and
Yeah,
we're that's bold and audacious, isn't it? And still has a that's the human condition to do that.
yeah, yeah. And the connectivity, isn't it? It's like that reach and that
Hmm.
those it's about I am connected to this vast, eternal, churning time. And that ninth is so much about feeling that moment when we are in that extensive connectivity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And hence an image like that can be truly a timeless image. I mean,
yeah,
it would be a shock to me if anybody listening doesn't know that one, right? Like, I mean,
yeah,
that's the reach of the ninth through the artistry of the Renaissance, the rebirth, the rebirth of soul in Florence, in that moment in history, coming out of the Dark Ages and into sudden illumination, and Téchnē being the heart of the Renaissance, right? I mean, these were polymaths, all of them. They're very, very skilled in multiple different areas of being, and with teachers and mentors and tutelage and help to become closer to God, closer to the
yeah,
divine.
yeah. And that it's never a complete process, that it is a repeated gesture and
Yeah.
I think that's also what comes out.
And that's the most potent element of that image, isn't it? This small gap, the tiny gap between the finger of the human and the finger of the god.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that in. It's really potent.
Yeah, it's very visual.
And very emotional as well. Very
Mm.
emotional. in terms of like, can I?
Yeah.
Will I? Can you feel me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
And am I also that, right?
yeah,
Am
yeah.
I also that? Or am I merely this?
Mm, mm.
Hmm.
The yearning.
The yearning, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That feels like a really potent, powerful place to perhaps find our completion. What do you think?
Mm, yeah. It feels it feels a really potent, powerful moment to say there's always more.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've dwelt well, I feel.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much for joining me and us and the audience, Amanda. We all appreciate where you've taken us today. It's been very rich and, yeah, pregnant with so many possibilities. And I feel that, and we've left behind many a dream door in this ninth house exploration. It's so good to do it with you. It's so good to have you to riff with. And I appreciate you and our friendship. And thanks for coming on the pod.
Thank you so much, Chris. Real pleasure to be with you and your audience. And thank you for what you're creating here. It's special and unique. So thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Thanks for listening, everybody. See you next time. Thank you for listening to On the Soul's Terms podcast. To support the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review, sharing with friends, or becoming a patron at patreon.com/onthesoulsterms. Until next time.